it's just paper silhouettes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but look at the, where's the pond now? Oh, right there, yeah.
The corner.
Huh? Reach what?
That corner, it's like sticky on the back. Yeah, I have
Oh.
the sticky company. Yeah, I do. I feel really good. Sorry. Well, there's two different ones. Aren't the egg cartons great?
Egg carton's really good. The muffin tins are really
Yeah,
good.
and the one above the muffin tin is a packing peanut.
Yeah.
And the phone stuff.
Yeah.
Other people did more cool floaties, like the tubes. But all of this is better than those.
Yeah.
So I just, another guy that I was working with said his wife was taking this, she had researched it and it's like natural and it was working, so I started giving it. Yeah. And there was a big mask, they took the mask off.
Definitely one of our boxes.
Oh, yeah. So was that whole archway, so.
Yeah.
These ones are like hair nets.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah, it's really cool. So creative.
I would have thought I would have thought that was just like an Amazon thing. Didn't realize you.
No, I was losing about the Amazon ones in my class, or these ones are.
The coral is wild.
So good.
The styrofoam peanuts that get painted to look like that rain coral, that's nuts.
So much creativity.
We've got a little light back here. And the spray foam. Like the pink and the blue.
They're just like a white detail.
The coral on the side. He's got spray foam, isn't it? And then the coin.
Sorry. I just had a thought. If we're doing the communion stuff, maybe we should stand down here, because we might trip over that. Yeah.
Where's the preacher gonna stand? All right. The big hand is on 12 or past it, so we can go ahead and get started. Good morning. As you can see, I'm not Paul. Paul is otherwise detained this week and asked me to cover for him. So Paul has been following this artistic metaphor of these painting metaphors, so he wanted watch your strokes to come with this story of maybe some great artwork that's been ruined by careless action. Artists and restoration staff have these amazing skills, right? Painters and people that restore the paintings have these talents and this precision, but if it's not a part of the process, then that can lead to disaster. So I present to you a one-of-a-kind 19th century fresco by the Spanish painter Elias Garcia Martinez. So the story goes, there was an elderly member of the Santuario de Misericordia Church in Borja in northeastern Spain. And her handiwork, or lack thereof, was discovered after the painter's granddaughter donated the painting called Echo Homo to the archives of the religious paintings housed at the Centro de Estudios Boraño. Excuse my bad pronunciations of Spanish. When the officials from the center went to examine the work a few weeks after, they noticed it was not how Martinez had left it. The last photo taken before any damage was done showed Martinez's intricate brushstrokes around the face of Jesus there on the left. Another photo was taken in July by officials trying to catalog the work, and they noticed all these splattered white marks, presumably the work of the woman trying to remove paint and prepping it to be restored. The photo on the right is then taken a month after Martinez's relatives donated the work. And there's these broad, thick layers of paint covering the really important details. Everything. You can't tell that that's Jesus at all. That looks like a Lego figurine. The crown of thorns on the head, the beard, everything's gone. Not a good day for art historians. Local officials knew that the restoration attempt by the woman was not malicious, just misguided. The woman turned herself in and said that she realized she was causing the damage and it got way out of hand. The woman identified herself and she wanted to restore the work with good intentions. The church and the center are now trying to figure out, what if something can be done to restore that piece of work. Yeah, good luck. Even if she tells you what she used, it goes from one of those little squeezy chickens to back to Jesus. Another example is from Bean the movie. I don't know if you've seen this movie or not. This one's nonsense. He's a museum docent from England who's sent to unveil Whistler's mother in California. And at the gallery on the day of the unveiling, he sneezes on the painting and then tries to get it off with his Kleenex, his handkerchief that has ink on it. So then he tries to wipe that off with paint thinner, and then he smears it completely off, her face off. So in trying to fix it, he draws a face in, right? Like, we have this fine-tuned precision of an artist or someone restoring art that they have to utilize that accuracy and the skills that they have. And no matter how skilled you are, if you're not doing that right, like 1 Corinthians 10:12, therefore let him who thinks he stand take heed that he does not fall, right? Like, if you don't exercise this precision that you have, there could be just disasters. So we're going to continue in the book of Numbers, and we're going to go from chapters 10, verse 11 to 11, verse 15. In the previous verses, we're made aware that it is time to leave Mount Sinai. The Lord has prepared his people for departure to march their way to the promised land. Numbers 10:11 tells us it's been 1 year and 1 month since leaving Egypt. And suddenly the cloud lifts and over the tabernacle, and it was time for them to pack up the tent and pack up everything and follow the cloud on the journey. And the trumpet blares in 10:13, and we're off. So talking about artwork that if someone doesn't take exact precise measurements, you get from on the left to on the right. The title of the lesson is Watch Your Strokes. We'll take it off of that so it's not distracting. No, you're good. So God went ahead and is leading the people to bring them to this place of rest. And if they only understood and we only understood this truth about God, who goes ahead of us to lead us and bring us to rest. It's wild to think about this people that's been prepping and planning and going through this process of becoming a people and becoming something structured. You think about a sports team, a football team going off to training camp, and they mesh and they grow and they become a team and they develop team patterns, right? Or a military battalion that goes to basic training and now they have this cohesiveness and they're together. And that Israel is now on their way to the promised land. Previously, their journey was from Egypt out of slavery, and now they're setting out from this wilderness of Sinai, and they were on their way to Canaan and to liberty. And they're actually off for the first time, according to the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. This is a big deal. This is their first time, right? The trumpets blow, and we're no longer scattered people. We're no longer a people without a home and a people without leadership and organization. We are now a people. Israel marches as this organized, prepared nation. They're not the same group that escaped from Egypt as a mob. Paul in the past, in past lessons, has been talking here on the, I'm looking this way, on the left side of how they organize as a camp. And then you see them, they line up that same way to march out. And they're ready to go. We see this theme and this direction of God and his people, that God changes these people into a real legitimate nation. Ingram has brought it up several times, that like you go from not being a people to being a people. You have to learn how to do this. You have to struggle and become this people and allow yourself to be led. And you have this amazing cross-reference as well. 1 Peter 2:10. You were once not a people, but now you are. The verse actually says, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. We look at this and we understand this story of what God is doing with Israel, but we also see that he does this with us when we follow him, right? We too were astray, and we were stuck in the slavery of sin and rebellion and not belonging, and then God makes us his people. So the cloud that left, right? You think about this cloud that picks up and takes off, and you follow it. Maybe this won't make any difference to you, but it makes me think of Mario, that you follow the little cloud in the video game, that you see this thing take off, and well, that's where we're going. Follow the cloud GPS. That's what it says to do. So the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. After this initial departure from Sinai, they were positioned to continue to Canaan. One commentator says the desert of Paran is a large plateau in northern Sinai, south of what later would be called the Negev of Judah, west of the Arabah. This forms the southernmost portion of the Promised Land, the presumed staging area for the assault on the land itself. So they are way out in the wilderness, way out in the desert. And obviously, we read the story, there were some stops along the way. You imagine you got 1 million plus people, we got to take some potty breaks and stop for refreshments. They stopped at Kibroth Hattaavah and Hazeroth before they finally reached the wilderness of Paran. I read in the commentary, this is the largest and most barren of the wildernesses traversed by the Israelites, covering much of the northern Sinai Peninsula. But again, take note, Paul in sending what he wanted to convey and what he wanted this lesson to be on, there's a real focus here that all of this prep work of freeing them and preparing them and teaching them to be his people, right, is geared to this exact point of bringing them to Canaan. They had become numbered and organized in Numbers 1 through 4. They had become cleansed and purified in Numbers 5. They had become set apart and blessed, Numbers 6. They had learned how to give and how to function as priests, Numbers 3 and Numbers 7 and 8. And then they were made to remember judgment and spared deliverance, brought Numbers 9. And they had God's presence as a guide and the tools needed to lead the people, right? So you imagine all of this, like you have all the skills at a job. You get a job at Amazon, you get a job at Boeing, you get a job wherever, and they work you through this process and they teach you all the skills necessary to be successful. You go through that orientation process, right? Now the trumpets sound and they're on their way to Canaan. And they get their marching orders and they're off. Israel breaks camp from Sinai to begin their journey to the Promised Land, exactly in the order that they were given to march back in chapter 2. The church studies this, right? And we think about that, but like, what happened if they just stayed at the mountain? What happened if they didn't trust in God, right? Like, they were this great nation with a great name and great law and a great leader, but then they had this great blessing awaiting them, so it's off we go. And in reading about this, and you understand how much prep work goes, and we look at all those previous Numbers chapters and what was done, that going to the promised land should be no sweat, right? We're ready to go. We're good. We went through the prep work and we're good to go, right? No, right? Like, they had great challenges ahead of them that can only be met by faith. I think sometimes maybe if you think of it like someone getting out of college. Okay, now I'm ready to go. I have all I need. I have all the tools. I'm good, right? I'm going to conquer life and kick it in the face. Or an athlete doing a rookie camp, right? You go through that rookie mini camp or training camp, and now I'm ready to start, right? I'm good to go. No, it only prepares for the great challenge, the actual, the battle itself. So we see what God did for these people, and there's this major comparison of what he did for Israel and what's done for us in Christ. We too, again, we're a people without a God, and God brings us in. We were purchased, we were sought out, we were purified by God. And then we too, as we'll read Israel did, we rebel against God as well. We have attitude and faith struggles. And the wilderness presents us with this concept of being saved, being brought out of the wilderness, but we're also kind of separated from God while we're in the flesh. And so we look at this idea again of the 1 Corinthians 10:12 of what if we don't make it all the way to Canaan, lest we fall. It's important to have a mentality of that this is a process of getting to where we need to be. My dad taught me a lot in Bible study when I was a kid that there's always a what and then there's a so what. There's reading the story, right? You can read about Methuselah, or you can read about Peter. You can read the what and understand the situation, the context, the story, the narrative, all of that. But then there's the so what, right? The why. Why do I study this? What is this beyond a simple comprehension of narrative? What does this do for me? And so I think the parallel text here is 1 Corinthians 10, right? And Paul's explaining to these people in Corinth about Israel's struggles and about the struggles that they had, and warning Christians not to have those same struggles. And it's such a difficult thing, right? Because if we're honest, the question is, well, have you ever fallen? Have you ever screwed up? Have you ever had a bad attitude in your faith? Yeah, of course, it's easy to do. We fall physically, but we also fall spiritually. And so this lesson, looking at their story and learning from them, is to be mindful and be aware and try our best not to fall and not to stray away. So it's interesting, you find yourself in a situation here in 10:29 through 32. Moses recruits, the name changes here. I tried doing all kinds of study because Moses' father-in-law has 3 different names in the Bible. I don't know if maybe he had a wife on the side. I doubt it. But there's also translation stuff. But in here, Hobab. Moses recruited Hobab to be their guide. So in what ways do you think recruiting the high priest of Midian to be a guide would be signs of a good leader? Why is that a good thing to do that? I'll give you.
Follow the cloud, so the need for a guide is a little.
Yeah. You're jumping ahead, Bobby. I think it was wise in a sense to look ahead, right? And assess the need and prepare that people follow this guy. He was not too proud to seek the help of other people. He chose someone who's well qualified and respected. And he was kind of persuasive in his request as well, because if you read those verses, father-in-law doesn't want to go. I'm going to stay here with my people. You peace out. We'll see you later. And Moses, from what I read, convinces him to go with them. But also, it presents the question for the inquiring mind that Bobby said. Why would, if you have God himself leading you, what do you need another person for? If you have the cloud, right, like, what do you need Hobab for? I don't need anybody else. I literally have God showing me where to go.
Well, this march could have taken, with a good guide, right?
Mhm.
With a good guide, this march could have taken 9 months.
Mhm. So it's an interesting question. I spent some time trying to like process through it, look at different commentaries, look online. It's interesting, right? Like, why do you want counsel if you have divine counsel? I don't understand that. If I've got God GPS, if it's actual capital GPS, I don't need anybody else to tell me where I need to go. But it seems like, from my take, what I could process out myself, it kind of seems like that.
I think there's some validity to, like, even if God is giving you divine direction,
Mhm.
you're still bringing a million. What's the with the Ark of the Covenant, all the
Yep.
accessories? Like, someone's got to figure out how to get a million people across this street.
Yep.
Like, God's not, the cloud isn't lifting people across the, whatever, or figuring out how to literally move boulders if needed.
Yep.
And even if, I mean, obviously we see, this isn't one of the times that they're particularly getting crabby and getting it documented on their grumblings. But there's never a march of a million people in a desert that doesn't have very, very tangible struggles. And if you say, hey, if you can't figure out, talk to Hobab, he's the guy.
Yep.
Like, we're trying to get to that cloud, but if you can't get around that, here's the guy in charge. And I think that like, whether or not this is like showing Moses's lack of faith or whatever, if you or I were to take even this small group of people to Kent, we would have to have appointed someone to say, hey, here's who's gonna like pick this, here's who's gonna pick the sidewalk.
Yeah. And that was kind of my conclusion as well. It seems like God's promise of guidance and success, it doesn't ever relieve anybody in the group from watchfulness and labor towards the same objective, right? Another great example would be God promising Paul that all the lives aboard the ship he's on would be spared. But it was the watchfulness and alertness of Paul and all of that prevented the sailors from lowering a boat and abandoning to certain death, right? Like, you think about things like prayer. We're supposed to pray like everything depends on God, because it does. But then we also work objectively on our end like it depends on us. If I say, okay, God, we really want to get this new house, you got it. Well, I'm not going to get that house. It doesn't work like that. There's still stuff on my end that I do. And so we consider that, right? And you consider the involvement of the people. Dirk, can you go to the next slide? Excuse me. Of course you can't see it, because why would you be able to? But so Israel leaves Sinai following the cloud of the Lord and Moses. And Moses prays to the Lord on their behalf. And I think it's interesting that you look at a spiritual leader here. We follow leaders as they follow the Lord. But what a great passage to kind of teach about the leader taking them out and going on this journey, that he's praying at the beginning and the end of the journey here. And you trust that the leaders, God's leaders, are going to be humble and wise and prayerful to lead God's people forward. All right. So now we're going to jump to chapter 11. You complain and you might just get what you ask for. So the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes 3 days after leaving Mount Sinai. And what are the people griping about? Life is hard. What had happened? Did they run into a herd of lions? Was there an earthquake? No. Nothing had changed. Nothing in particular. Life is just hard. And the people in the wilderness, it's not an easy journey, but that's not a temptation for us today, right? Like, we don't do that ever. We don't ever complain about how hard life can get. Unfortunately, it's this super easy temptation to fall into. And you read God's response in verse 1. When the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned amongst them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. You wonder if the worst complainers were on the outskirts of camp. But you think about that contrast, right? In Exodus, the people, when they lacked food and water, they complained, and God took care of them. And God responds to them, and you notice nothing is lacking for these people. They're complaining because they don't like life. Life is not easy. Life is difficult. It has hardships and adversities. And you You look at what happens, though. Moses prays, and this fire, this anger goes out. Moses intercedes on behalf of the people and intervenes, and the wrath that should fall on the people goes away. You think about that. The intercessor intervenes on behalf of the people, and the fire is extinguished. Where do we know that from? Can I have the next slide? So Israel complains again. This one was hard. I tried to find an image of them complaining about manna and quail, and that's the best one I could find. It's kind of a magic eye, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's upside down. But they complain again, right? And this time they're tired of manna. Where's the beef? Right? We want something else. And they desired this lower class diet that they just left from Egypt, right? And they don't realize what's ahead in Canaan. They don't realize land of milk and honey, wheat, barley, figs, the list goes on, pomegranates. Many sometimes, I think, have this issue today, right? You're kind of tired of the same old thing. And we want something new and different at church. We want some new change, some more interesting, more food, more fun, a different service. And we're more interested in activities and actions than, coming heaven. Then Moses has his response in 11 through 15. Moses is frustrated and exasperated by these people. And it's interesting here because they went to the doors of their tents and they're complaining to each other. They want to be heard but not dealt with. And if you go back, I won't make Dirk go back, but if you look at how the camp lines up, God's in the middle. So if you really had something to say, he's just to walk away. You can go to the tent and air your grievances. But instead, they're grumbling amongst each other. They avoid that door of God's tent, and they want to just become one miserable clamor of, ungratefulness and unhappiness. I wonder if church leaders have to deal with this. Hey elder, hey deacon, hey preacher, what's going on? What's going on in my life? Why isn't God taking care of me? I don't get it. But your resource is folded hands away. Like you have this opportunity to speak to God directly. At the sound of this clamor and this complaint, Moses prays and lets loose this pretty relatable complaint here. Did I conceive these people? Are they my children? Like they're blubbering all over me and God doesn't correct or rebuke him, right? Like in some translations I read, it says, why have you afflicted your servant? You see in his trouble, right, that holiness is colliding with affliction, that these people are cranky and frustrated, and it's in direct contrast with God just providing them a way out in freedom and joy. And so Moses understands, I think he understands the essence of the people's request. I think we do too. They want something more than manna. They want something else. They want variety. But Moses can't satisfy them. And so Moses' prayer is the burden of the people, that it's kind of on Moses, and the pressure of leading sinful people appears to be like God's not even on his side anymore. That's how Moses is perceiving this, right? Like it's so bad, like what are you doing to me here? This is terrible. I can't stand these people. They're not my people, they're your people. Moses' despair reaches the tippy top, right, the apex, and he just begs for God's permission to die. It's tempting to dismiss a suicidal breakdown there, right? Like, we didn't actually mean that. But what an ultimate expression of, like, self-pity. Like, I can't handle this, man. I just end it. I don't have what it takes to lead these people. Just get rid of me. It's a serious and a desperate, like, to understand wickedness and to understand what's so bad about being this leader, man. Everybody reveres and adores you, but you have to deal with the downfall of these people. I read about this wretchedness, the Hebrew word. It can mean despondency, failure, poor quality, but it was just, in a broader sense, it was evil. So Moses had finally arrived at a spiritual epiphany that I think religious leaders have. Sinful people can be led for a while by a good person, but they can only be saved by a perfect man. So you think about this, Moses is like, I can't. take him back, man, because this is not on me. I can't handle these people. His insufficiency comes painfully into focus here, right? Like you see, he's trying to lead these people, but 3 days out of the gate, they're already griping. I can't imagine. Moses was this awesome, fierce leader and a humble servant and an intercessor, but for all he could do, right, there's only so much he can do. He can't meet their every undying need as they change. Well, we don't want beef now we want fondue, like, make it happen. And Moses is like, I can't shoulder, I can't save them. I can't meet every single need. And so to think about this contrast, right? Jesus is the true and better Moses who died to satisfy his people with his own flesh. On the cross, God's holiness meets with man's sinfulness. And in the affliction of Jesus, who became our wretchedness, he bore something that only he could bear. So it's neat to study this and to kind of contrast this story and think about Moses and Jesus is the new Moses and leading people out of captivity. There's so many parallel lines that connect these two stories. And there's this stark contrast between the Israelites who at the first sign of adversity, right, like they unravel and they bail and they start to lose trust in God. And when we encounter adversity, I think it can be the same reaction. Like, God, what's going on here? Like, becoming a Christian, I got promised high cotton. I got promised that everything was going to be great. And why am I experiencing hardship here? Like, what are you doing? And I think it's really important to counter that. We need to have the same attitude Moses wanted the Israelites to have out in the wilderness, right? You were not a people, but you now are a people. I made you a people. God made them a people. God makes us a people. So that frustration should be met with, all right, I'm frustrated, but I'm also free. Dirk, can I have the last slide? So this concept of, we're way early, holy cow. This concept of watch your strokes comes back to us today in this understanding of be mindful of your actions and the choices that you make and the attitudes that we're this beautiful masterpiece in Christ. But we can lose our focus and we can slip and we can start to make mistakes when we encounter wilderness like Israel did. And obviously spiritual pride is a major issue, and it's a powerful deceiver in a self-reliance mentality of like, I'm good, God, I got this. I think there's a lot of people that have that mentality. It seems like Israel had that, like, you're there in case we need to, in case of emergency, break glass, but we've got this. Like, we're all set. And I think that mentality can really erode your trust in God. And Paul conveys the idea of a person who thinks he's standing firm in the faith, but in reality is overconfident and self-deceived. Take heed lest you fall is a warning to those in the church convinced of their own righteousness, right? Like, there's a struggle that you read about Israel having of like, okay, we're good now, we don't need you. I think we have that same thing sometimes of like, I'm good, I got this, right? And God was displeased with the Hebrew people because of their overconfidence and their lack of dependence on him. What a different story it would have been of like, hey God, we know you've got it, but we're kind of hungry. What a different attitude that would have been. What a different understanding as a people, right? But instead, the focus was these evil cravings in the heart. I think if my attitude is, I don't need you, I got this, I think I'm saved, but I might not be. If I'm leading a life where I'm good and I don't need God and I'm not dependent on him, then that's one of those, I'm claiming something that I'm not really about, because that isn't what the Christian faith is. It's not I become a Christian and then that goes in the cubby and then I'm back to my normal life. It's a whole different change, and now reliance and transformation happens. I feel like I'm talking a lot Any questions, any thoughts?
I just have a comment.
Sure.
What you just said is pretty sad that people who aren't Christians, that they think just because they're a good person, they're saved, they're going to heaven, and they might not even, believe, whatever, and they think, oh yeah, well, I'm going to the good place, because I'm a good person.
Mhm. And I think Paul warns for Christians, just like Israelites face trials in the wilderness, so too New Testament believers are going to face hardships and tests. 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, we're going to go past 13, sorry. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. Sometimes I feel like we as individuals, right, we're corporate Christians here assembling at Springbrook, but we're also individuals, right? And as individuals, we feel like our struggles are beyond anybody else's comprehension to grasp. Nobody understands what I'm dealing with or the poor choices I'm making or the struggles I'm having. And Scripture says trials are common to man, though. And so I think it's difficult sometimes because we have this resource that's created. Don't want to get too preachy, but we have this resource that's created in the church that other people are going through what we're going through. And it may not be the exact same house, but it's the same street. And so I think it's really important to utilize these resources that God created to help us fight when we're in a wilderness, when we're in that kind of struggle that God's not working for me, that it's nice sometimes to even, for me as an example was being a parent. It's really interesting to be at a point when Bailey was really little and talk to like Sarah and Amber and the next rung up, and they're like, oh yeah, that's normal, you're good, you're just fine. And then be like, oh, okay, cool, I'm not awful, there's just a baby, it's cool, I'll figure it out. And then now when she's like 4.5, to again talk to like a Paul or someone else that has kids that are 10, 11, and you're like, hey, I'm really struggling with this. So I think it's wild to read this story and to understand this new people and to sympathize with them a little bit that they were new. So following God and trusting him wholeheartedly was this new concept as they had just been free. I can play the card and be like, no, it's been a year of you prepping. You've had plenty of time. But how often we do the same thing. I was baptized in 2002, so I'm at 22, 23 years. I still mess up all the time, and my attitude's like, what are you doing, God? Like, I'm trying to find a new job. Can you help me out here? Like, come on. But that is that attitude change that they needed to have and we need to have of, you're bought and paid for, man. Life is tough, but you're also freed from slavery. Final thoughts. John? Anything? Anybody? Yeah.
I thought it was interesting what you were saying about maybe 15 years ago, there was a big movement going around like go and let God, but you didn't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just say a prayer and all of a sudden everything was great. And that's not true.
it was interesting in doing World Bible School study, a lot of people would ask about that, and I would try to point out, like, well, yeah, the sinner's prayer is not in the Bible, so I'm not sure what you're doing, but but what's so scary about that is there's very clear instructions on what to do and how to live your life and salvation, and I feel like people, in the nature of people, pick and choose what they like, and they're like, nope, this will be our banner. If you go to Overlake in Redmond, Overlake Christian Church, I think I went to a concert there when I was a kid, they have the Great Commission with an ellipses at the end. It says, go out in the world making disciples of all men, ... And it's wild to think of someone that's like, no, I'm good. We're going to decide what it says. We're going to reinterpret what things are and what salvation is and how to act and what verses matter. So I definitely think that we need to have an understanding of what's been done for us and then share what we can do to avoid falling away, to avoid, lest we fall is such a big deal, that the attitude of I've got this is so quickly takes us away from an understanding of who we are in Christ. You can go to recess 5 minutes early.